think I'd prefer to use the term next generation geothermal for describing all kind of nascent geothermal technologies, because people actually like to use advanced geothermal to specifically describe closed loop systems, which is, I guess I can start with those. It's it's a fairly simple from a design standpoint, where you essentially just drill a lot of pipes into the ground, and it acts as a giant heat exchanger. And if you have enough pipes, you can pump water through them and extract heat. And the fundamental issue with geothermal power more broadly is that conventional geothermal is essentially isolated to regions where you have a confluence of high heat, and also water, and kind of the permeability in the rock to actually pump that water out of the system and use it to extract heat. The water is a carrier for the heat that is in place in that region. So there are places like, for example, Yellowstone in my background, where you have hot spots that also host lots of water. And we don't develop Yellowstone, thankfully, but we could. And there are other areas in the world where we do develop these resources and essentially just drill wells down into them and pump the water out to extract the heat. But while the kind of confluence of heat and water and permeability is fairly rare, heat is actually not super rare. And if you drill down a few kilometers into the ground in most of the Western US, for example, or other parts of the world where you have particularly high heat flows, you can get very large quantities of energy without having to go super deep. The issue is actually getting that heat out of the rock and through a turbine. And so all of these next generation geothermal technologies are really focused on how can we go to places where you have more or less just hot, dry rock and turn that into a viable source of power. And so they're all focused on basically how do we get water through that rock to extract that heat and bring it to the surface. The closed loop system is one way to do that, where you just drill a bunch of pipes. And then the other leading approach is enhanced geothermal power, which is where you drill regular wells down into that hot rock and then use essentially a form of hydraulic fracturing to create these large fracture networks in that rock, which you can then pass fluid through to extract the heat. So there are two approaches to essentially giving the same final outcome, which is passing water over hot rock to extract the heat from it and bring that to the surface.